Did we do the mic check? Is your mic on?
No, come on, baby kid.
Is mine on?
You won't get by yourself. You won't get by yourself.
All right, mine's on. So
I turned yours on.
okay.
Okay, south of France, wine,
Are
real
we?
people. Yeah, we've been recording.
Oh, you've been recording this whole time. I thought you hit stop recording. That's so embarrassing.
I did not.
So embarrassing.
For you, yeah. Okay, wine, real
This is
people.
it.
This is the climax to our French little mini series. I think we've done 9 or 10 episodes. If not 9, then 10 will be champagne when we go back to France.
Shit. Yeah, we gotta go back.
But
Man.
snap. But climate and grape growing. James, kick us off.
All right, we are in the south of France. You are right on that. Oh, are we annotating? It's annotating time.
Here,
I get to do it.
Here, you do it then.
So you have
Press
the
format.
I'm going to draw in red today. We have the Mediterranean Sea down there. So we will have a warm Mediterranean climate because we are so south in France.
Is that why they call it the south of France?
I think so. So your climate here really going to be, you got to have hot summers, you're going to have mild winters, and you'll have very low levels of rainfall. And because of that, drought is a real concern for winemakers here. You have 2 very important winds that we should talk about if we're talking about south of France. We have the minstrel wind, which comes south from the Rhone, and the tramontane, which passes through the Massif Central, which is like a mountain range, and the Pyrenees, the Pyrenees, which is the mountain range that forms the natural border between France and Spain.
There's the tramontane.
Yeah, there's the Pyrenees. And because of the winds, actually, and the dry climate, there's very low disease pressure here, specifically fungal diseases. We talked about in the Loire video about how their wet season really is a problem because of fungal growth. Here, it's quite the exact opposite.
So we're going to then touch on our main grape varieties. The first is, ironically, the smallest in terms of importance into what we're covering, Picopole, which is a high acidity green fruited grape with notes of, like I said, green fruit and very citrus forward as well. We have Muscat, which is widely planted and it's a local variety to the area at the south of France and generally used for its sort of grapey aromas in a dry wine style, but also used for fortified wines. We actually just had a Muscat coming from Rutherglen. I think
it was a rare Rutherglen, yeah. So it was very syrupy.
Yeah,
it was like 360 parts of sugar.
Yeah,
grams of sugar per liter.
Yeah, so it was a lot, but a nice style. They also make some sweeter fortified coming out of this region as well with this grape Muscat. Grenache Blanc, we're all seeing as well, making a dry wine style with some soft aromas of peach. Can easily oxidate, however, so keep that in mind. And you can blend this with other local varieties or with perhaps some Rhone varieties as well. Grape black grape varietals.
It's just late.
We're going to see is Grenache, which we are seeing a lot of production in this part of France, suited for slightly warmer, dry summers, which is what this area is able to perform for. Syrah is nice in slightly cooler climates, so perhaps those areas that have a little bit more effect from the 2 prevailing winds that we're looking at. Carignan, we're seeing production of as well. In this area, we're having it be very bold with high tannin, high acidity, and lots of color. But where it lacks is some fruit characteristics. And we do have some old vines, even when they are planted on poor soil, still have the ability to produce nice, high quality wine. We're seeing some semi-carbonic maceration, which can sort of soften those tannins and bring them down just a little bit, make it perhaps a little bit more approachable. Mourvedre, another red grape we're looking at, ripens successfully only in the warmest sites. So we're going to want to have that in our sites that are a little bit more southerly, a little bit closer to the equator, or with appropriate, aspect. If it's off a river, getting that reflection somewhere where it's going to be ideally warm. Cinsault, our last red grape, sometimes used for rosé production, or in a blend, adds a little bit of extra character.
All right, those are pretty much our primary grape varietals, but there are some international varietals that are planted here, and these are mainly for your IGP level wines. You're not going to see a very um, a Minervois Viognier. I mean, it's stuff like that. You have your Merlot, Cabernet Sauvignon, you have Sauvignon Blanc and Chardonnay, and finally your Viognier. These all account for very little amounts of plantings within these regions. So starting off, we have the big old Languedoc. So this kind of area covers all of the vineyards from the Spanish border to the French city of Nimes. And it has a couple of important appellations that we've highlighted. And they each actually have their own individual regulations to make things much easier for the wine student studying wine. Starting with the Côte de Roussillon as our first little region here. You have bright sunlight, low rainfall, strong winds, and that really leads to very concentrated wines coming out of this region. And you have even further within Côte de Roussillon Village, where the best vineyards of the Côte de Roussillon Village lie north of the Côte de Roussillon.
Two more sort of appellations that we're going to look at in this larger Languedoc region, FI2, which is just north of Côte de Roussillon Village, split into two primary sections. The one that's a little bit more coastal is known for its more fuller-bodied wines, which allows for a little bit more complexity on the mouth and the palate as well. The cooler, more inland strip has a little bit more altitude and leads to more lighter bodied styles of wine. Corbier, another region that we're looking at, not necessarily just white. We're seeing this sort of similar effect where it's slightly warmer near the coast. Vineyards are planted with altitude so that the Tremontais is able to come in and cool them during the daytime. And then this is then divided into 11 sub-appellations on top of the Corbier appellation. Minervois can really vary in quality due to altitude and things like distance from the Atlantic and the cooling effects from the Atlantic, as well as something like soil content. And then I'll let James pick it up with Picpoul, because I don't want to say Picpoul.
You have Picpoul de Pinet. So this location is near the coast, and you have that cooling sea breeze. As such, you have a very high acid wine when you're actually using the grape Picpoul. And this really isn't an extensive list. Appellations continue to be added and promoted. The south of France is a very rapidly developing wine region, and we'll see that in the cooler areas, you'll produce the best Syrah, described as having more finesse and lighter tannins, whereas your warm areas will produce better Mourvèdre with full body, with like meaty and gamey flavors. And the best wines are full-bodied and have a concentrated spicy red fruit aromas and flavors.
So going to the other side of the south of France, we're going to talk about Provence, which is really known for its rosé production. The hillsides are really going to provide the most protection from the minstrel winds. They don't have to worry about the Tremonton because they're not near the Pyrenees and the Motif Central, so they only have to worry about the prevailing influence of the minstrel coming from the southern Rhone. So hillsides protect against that. There's a large amount of rosé production, like I mentioned. They generally are producing a dry rosé, super red fruited, light to medium body, and generally paler in color in most rosés. We then have the appellation of Côte de Provence, which is the largest appellation in Provence, and is yet again the majority rosé production. And within Côte de Provence, there are 3 AOCs. We're going to touch on just one. Vendôme, which is the most important due to its premium Mourvèdre production. It has a really reliable history of ripening on the south-facing slopes, so that's where most of these grapes are going to be planted, so that they are able to experience the majority of the ripening that they can. And we're going to have more of a full-bodied, darker style with extremely powerful tannins due to this reliable ripening and this ability to get the full character out of these grapes.
All right, moving on. We're just talking about IGP wines, like I mentioned earlier. International varieties can be planted, and in the south of France, and they're usually made for these IGP wines. One big IGP we'd like to mention is the Pays d'Oc. So that covers pretty much everything that makes up the Languedoc. It's the greater region that the Languedoc sits in. And this IGP permits a wide amount of like labeling practices as well as varietal labeling. Is that all we have?
That's it.
That's it. Okay. That was the south of France, and that means France is over.
Still wine production in France.
Oh shit! Still wine production in France is over. So like, it's over.
Okay.
What are we doing tomorrow?
Eastern Europe.
Eastern Europe.
Germany.
Oh, Germany.
That'll be fun.
I love some German Riesling.
She
Aufschließen on my Spätlese, on my
Sharpen
Weiss